with young kids, with kids the ages that y'all have right now, this is the time where you establish your values around screens in your home. And so you could argue with me and say, well, I think a little bit of Fortnite is okay. Well, actually it's not, because that's for teenagers and up, but every first grader is playing it. But you could say, well, what about a little bit of this and a little moderation here? And we don't want our kids to binge and go crazy over this stuff. Yeah. Well, I'm telling you that moderation doesn't work in these areas. And the reason why is because they're too addictive.
Aloha, welcome to All Things Possible. We're so excited for today's topic, talking about screen addiction. And it's a hot one. It might be a little intense, but it's so needed. So be sure to subscribe, hit the like. We're going to dive right on in. This is Melanie Hempe you're going to be hearing from, and you're going to hear a lot about what she does, and we're excited to share. We're here with Melanie Hempe. She's started ScreenStrong Families. This is a passion subject for us.
I'm so stoked to have you, Melanie. This subject is just so essential to be hands-on with, aware of, on top of as parents and on behalf of our children. So I'm just honored and excited to hear your story and the work that you do and learn from you and even pick up some tips for our own family. And but thanks so much for being here, Melanie.
For sure. Thank you for having me. I was so excited when you reached out and I was like, oh my goodness, this will be so fun to talk to you because you have 4 children and I have 4. And I know, I'm so, 4 boys and a girl even. And I'm so passionate about this with young families like your ages of your kids, because that's where it all starts. And it doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to be a disaster, and that's what I'm really helping people.
And I'm guessing you're using the word disaster because maybe that rings home with your own story with your children, kind of having somewhat of a disaster situation when it comes to technology. So should we go ahead and dive in on your story? Would you?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. And, I could talk to you about it for hours. So I'll try to just keep it short because it's such a sad story, but also, so important for people to understand. And so my background is in nursing. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I haven't been in the hospital in a while. I've been doing this work instead and using my nursing background for that. But we have 4 children. We moved to North Carolina. We were just rocking and rolling, thinking everything was great. And my oldest son became very addicted to video games. Right under our nose. We had no idea that this was a thing, but looking back, I see all the signs now. But at the time, I didn't really understand. And how it is, Bethany, with and Adam, with your first child, everything, you don't know what you're doing exactly. Everything's so new. And your first kid is usually pretty compliant. And he was such a great kid. And he was just working through this parenting thing with us pretty well. So we were stunned in middle school when he started dropping out of all of his sports and his activities. And he just really started to change. And he just wanted to play video games all the time. And it started with games like Minecraft and things that were so socially acceptable. Right. And I mean, Adam, you know all about video games. I didn't know much about him at all, but I just thought, okay, he's a boy, so he plays video games. That's just what you do. I never even thought that there could potentially be any problem with it. And I had no idea really what he was playing, which is mistake number 1. I heard about what he was playing, but I just assumed that if they made these games for kids, that they must be safe, right? So I made the mistake of not really sitting down and playing with him. And so all through middle school, he started dropping out of tennis. He dropped out of baseball. And it was during the time in the parenting world where there was a lot of, in the news or in the parenting world, the news kind of about overscheduling your kids. So I didn't want to overschedule him, and I didn't want to make him do activities because it said it would make him too stressed. So I'm thinking, okay, well, he wants to quit all these things, but really what he wanted to do is just play more video games. Right. So I was caught, and I still look back and like, I'm such a detective mom. Like, how did I miss this? This was such a huge miss.
What were some of the signs?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could find the missing sock and the missing shoe, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I was like, I mean, I'm not a perfect mom by any stretch, but how did this happen where he became so immersed in his games that he started dropping out of our family? Really, that's the story. He started choosing his game over everything that we did. Yeah. He didn't want to come upstairs and hang out with us anymore. He didn't want to like come up when my daughter had her birthday or even Christmas. Hey, Adam, why don't you come open presents? It got pretty bad. And then in school, they gave him a laptop in 9th grade. And that was when we lost all control over his gaming, because whether you want to believe it or not, your kids are gaming on their laptops. They're gaming on every screen they can find, on their phones, on their laptop. They don't need just the Xbox. You know, they can just game anywhere there's a screen. And so he started really escaping into his video game, and it started causing a lot of conflicts in our home. And it's hard to imagine now that we lived through so much pain with this. And it's very emotional for me because I now look back and I feel like I was like the drug dealer. And that's really hard to grasp as a parent, to know that you did something that contributed to pain and suffering in your child's life. It's very, very hard. I was the game cop mom. Okay. I was constantly setting the kitchen timer, and I was just the bad guy all the time. And I'm so thankful that y'all haven't had to experience this yet, but you know, just all the directives around getting this child off the game long enough to engage in life. And, you know, the other mistake that I made was he was a straight A student. And this is very common for gamers. If your son is a gamer, you have to be very careful because they're usually the smartest kids in your house. And because games today are not what they used to be, right? It's not Pac-Man. We're not playing Pac-Man anymore. And that's where my brain was stuck. You know, I kept thinking, he's just playing Pac-Man like my brother and I played at the arcade when we were growing up. But it wasn't like that at all. And he was very, very bright, straight A. So it's interesting how we grade our own parenting based off our kids' grades. So I thought he was okay. But through 9th and 10th, 11th grade, it got really bad. We would just have a lot of conflicts, and I could not wait for him to go to college. And all my friends were really upset that their kids were going away. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm so ready for him to go start his life. And that was really sad, you know, for me too. So off he goes to college. He went to a great school. He, like I said, he was in the engineering department. He was really smart. But he ended up gaming most of his first year in college, and he ended up dropping out. Wow. And we were just devastated. Like, and I didn't know right away, but we went to go pick him up, and he gets in the car, and, you know, I'm looking at him with my nursing background, and I'm thinking, he's on drugs. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And he was very depressed. He was, he just looked terrible. And he told, and I asked him that terrible question that you pray that you never have to ask your kids, you know, are you on drugs? And he said, no, Mom, that video game did something to me. I've been in bed for a week. I haven't eaten. I haven't finished my classes. And by the way, I'm dropping out. And so on the way home in that car ride, you know, it was really sad, but it was also like when you finally get an answer, it was like an answer to what had been going on for the last 4 years. He literally had a chemical addiction to the video game. And this is my message for families. Families need to understand that this is very serious. This is not just some weird parenting opinion out there. This is all grounded in medical science. And so I immediately started going to conferences and learning more from the neuroscientists and different friends that I had about gaming addiction. I mean, you should have seen me. I was like a maniac trying to get as much
Yeah.
information as I could.
Did you
Yeah.
find
I
like
mean,
your son's not the only one that's gone through this?
yeah. So what happened was I dove into the research. I found all this information. I made a little slide deck, and our school started having me come there, and then different homeschool groups and different groups started having me come. But the very first thing I ever did, I had my slide deck, and I'm talking about brain stuff and brain development and what happens to your kid to their brains when they're on screens. So it was like so sad, but it's also so good, because it's like all of a sudden you have an answer for why your kids are acting the way they're acting. And so the very first thing that we did, I thought we would have about 25 people. So I made 25 little handouts, and we get to the school, and there's like 125 people there. And the principal was like, oh my gosh, this is a much bigger problem than we realized. And so from that point on, I started doing lots of presentations and really helping a lot of families. And so our program today is a result of that. So ScreenStrong, ScreenStrong.org is where you can go get more information about it. But we have an ambassador program, Bethany and Adam, that is so exciting, because we have now about 140 speakers that we have trained to go out into their communities with the slide decks that we make for them. So they don't have to do all the work. They have it all done. We have all the research. And I'm like, I got really good at explaining this in simple terms. And that's what's really needed in our culture, is more education around screen addiction. It is a real thing. Back when I first started, it was like a bad word, like, nobody wanted to hear video game addiction, or, they didn't want to hear social media addiction. But now,
even now, people don't want to hear that. And I think of my childhood, I played a little bit of Donkey Kong and Mario Karts. But my brothers were pretty into gaming, and sometimes I would leave the house in the morning to go surfing and like do some stuff, hang with my friends. Like, I was a very motivated individual, but I would leave the house and be gone for like 8 hours, and my brothers would be in the same place they were in when I had left. And that always like rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, this is not right. Like, I don't like this. Like, I don't want this to be a part of my life. And then fast forward now, being a mom, I was already kind of aware of this. And even, when you think of like, you're focusing on gaming, but there's a lot of other layers to understand too, like porn and social media addiction. These are other huge challenges. And I'm finding that, it needs to be talked about, and education is what empowers us to make the right choices. To be aware is going to compel us to serve our family the best way that we can.
You're right. It's all toxic screens, and that includes video games, social media, and pornography. Those are the three areas that we spend all of our time on. I think it's really important for parents to understand, whether it's a video game, whether it's social media, or whether it's pornography, they fall all under the same thing that it does to your brain. And we have MRI studies that we show on our slide deck, and it's really cool. We have videos. We show what happens to your brain, and we have to teach about the overview of the problem. The overview of the problem is that kids are getting stuff way too early, right? And honestly, if I had to diagnose the biggest problem, it's an attachment disorder. Kids are detaching from their home way too early. Like you noticed, even with your brothers, they're playing 8 hours a day. They're hooked into this thing that, because of the persuasive design, is pulling them out of the real world. Their brain gets a little taste of that high dopamine. And this is the biggest scientific fact that's the mystery for most families. They don't understand that it's all about dopamine, right? And so if they get too much dopamine, if your kid gets too much dopamine doing something, we know what happens. They're going to want to do it more. When a child has dopamine producing things, when we call it dopaminergic, when there's an activity that is so high on the dopamine scale, it might be okay for a minute. It may be okay maybe for a few months every now and then, but then what's going to happen is they're going to start craving it. And so this is the underlying cause for every home in America, everyone that's struggling with this. And I think most homes have at least one child who's struggling with this. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. You try to take their video game away and they have a meltdown. You you're having these conflicts and these arguments all the time and constant fighting about screen time and whatever, it's because of the dopamine. Your child is getting so much dopamine from this. Their body's craving it. Their brain's craving it. And this is what parents need to understand. It is the same dopamine that you get when you're on cocaine. Dopamine is dopamine is dopamine. It doesn't matter how it comes, whether it's triggered by a drug, whether it's triggered by a screen. This is a key point for parents medically to understand this, that we all get high on our own dopamine.
Yeah. And earlier on, you'd call yourself the drug dealer. You were supplying that drug, that dopamine. And that's, that's big to like say, hey, I owned up to that. And I feel like that's hard for parents to be like, hey, they can sometimes feel, I feel like trapped and being like, I'm trapped in this technological device. Like everyone's telling me I need to have my child on this, or like the only solution to my whiny children is just to give them an iPad. And be
it
like,
works.
Here you go, like shh, just go over there and be quiet for a little bit. How often do we see, go to a restaurant and you see the whole family sitting there looking at phones and like, we just have empathy on them. Not like, I don't want to make people feel bad, but it's like, there's something we need to take ownership as parents, being leaders in our family, and be like, let's set the guidelines here, and it's for a good reason. And how have you done it? How did that work with your children? Like when you started to notice the problem,
or
they obviously
already
had the addiction. They had the screens. Like, what's the best approach? Are you like just ripping them out of their hands, or is there like do you have to wean them off, so to say, off the drug? Or
it's such a great question. And so when Adam came home, it was really tough because now I had a 19-year-old living on my sofa. This was a bad thing, and he was still, playing his games. And so I did a little bit of a bold thing because I was at the end of my rope, and I called the military, and he had mentioned that he had kind of wanted to look at the Army. So I jumped on that, and he was recruited, and he went into the Army for 5 years, and he got what we now know was the very best thing for him at the time. It was, in his case, he had about 14 weeks of no gaming, no anything. And it's called basic training, right? In the Army. Right. And I didn't know back then how important that was for that fast to happen. And for him to have 14 weeks, he says, Mom, I didn't even have my own underwear, much less my game. And so he went through Army, and then that discipline and the exercise and everything, just really helped him.
Hi, kitty cat.
That discipline and the exercise really helped him. And so what I learned is what I share now worldwide with ScreenStrong. We went through it the hard way. Then my daughter came along. I said, honey, you're not going to have a smartphone. You're not going to have social media. We'll give you a flip phone and that's it. And you'll be fine. And, she thrived. And it was during a really hard time because all her friends had smartphones and social media. And we just said, no, sorry. When you get those screens out and you stop arguing and you stop having to manage this crazy stuff, then your kids get to really enjoy life.
Hey everyone, did you know we have a private community to empower families?
We know life is full of challenges and cultural norms can be leading us everywhere but the right path.
Families are stretched thin, teens are struggling, and staying anchored in faith can be really tough.
That's why we created something transformative, an online community designed to strengthen families, deepen relationships, question cultural lies, and encourage you to grow together in your faith.
Live shows with Adam and I, expert interviews, Bible studies, and fun family challenges, giveaways, and even brand new podcasts that you're listening to. We're here to equip you with the tools to thrive.
Our community will also be the first invited to our in-person epic family surf events that we will create memories that will last forever.
Join us on this journey. When you sign up for an annual membership, you will get free access to our top life courses, and you are automatically entered for a chance to win a trip for free to Kauai.
Awesome. So gather your family and join us for deeper connection and faith-filled fun in your home. Click the link to learn more, and we'll see you inside. You know that Bethany and I are incredibly intentional about how we approach our lives, from the content we consume all the way to the foods we eat.
When we started researching the food industry, it got us fired up to seek responsible, clean, and sustainable food sources.
Did you know that over 85% of the grass-fed beef in stores is imported and is labeled as product of the USA since it's packaged here? The truth is, much of the meat on the grocery store shelves is filled with things you don't want. Antibiotics, hormones, questionable origins, and even harmful seed oils.
That's why we choose GoodRanchers.com, the brand that stands for American quality and integrity.
At Good Ranchers, they do things the right way. All their meat is born, raised, and harvested in the USA.
When you buy from Good Ranchers, you're not just getting better meat, you're standing with American farmers, ranchers, and families who have been feeding this country for generations.
Good Ranchers products are free from hidden additives. There are no antibiotics ever, and no added hormones, and no seed oils. Just one simple ingredient you can read, and that's meat. But the best part, Good Ranchers delivers straight to your door. No more last-minute grocery store runs, long lines, or wondering if you're getting the best quality.
Can we just say, too, their chicken nuggets are incredible. So, just high-quality American meat shipped directly to you. As long as you're located in the lower 48, are you ready to get the quality your family deserves? Right now, you can subscribe to any Good Ranchers box and get $40 off your first order when you use my code Bethany at checkout. That's GoodRanchers.com, and by using my code Bethany, you'll get $40 off your first box of America's best meat. So let's be intentional about our life and be intentional about what we put in our body. Let's go to GoodRanchers.com today. I think of like a lot of times parents will kind of celebrate gaming because the father likes to game, and so he's gaming with his child. And I don't know if you could speak to that. I think it's it might feel like a bit of an attack on the father and the child and the family. But I think that there's so much beauty in, getting outside, playing baseball, like kicking a soccer ball around, learning some sort of sport, like really spending true time together. Like a lot of times I'll be driving on the side of the road and I'll look at the cars next to me. And so often I will see a teenage boy with his father, headphones in, eyes on the phone. This is essential time. This teenager needs to be gleaning off his father, not in another world. And so we have this new disconnect between family members. And now what's the result of that? This young man is going to be a lot more insecure because he never had that fatherly bond that he needed in his teenage years. And instead, he had a screen and a bunch of distractions and likely some sort of addiction attached to that. Right. And so it's such a challenge. But can you speak a little bit to the idea that, but father and son are doing it together?
I get the same question from wives a lot too, because their husbands are gaming. And maybe that's a whole nother show because that's a delicate issue, but I know how to talk about that too. But let's talk about the dads right now. And
I could not put up with that. There's just no way.
I did have one question before we jump in. Is there studies about, I'm thinking about like the old school, you mentioned Pac-Man. Is there like a difference between like Pac-Man and Tetris versus...
Maybe ask that after she answers this, but let Adam ask it because it's nice to engage back and forth a bit. So
we should definitely talk about that. There is a difference, but let's talk about dads for a minute and their misconception that they are actually spending time with their kids in the game world. Okay, it feels like you are, but you're not. Okay. It's and the reason why you're not is because men play video games differently than their little 10-year-old sons do. So it's more like sandbox play, when two toddlers are in the sandbox and they're playing side by side. it's side by side play. It's not like I'm really interacting. Plus, the biggest problem with it is because of the dopamine activity, it affects a man's brain differently than it does a 10-year-old boy's brain. So a 10-year-old boy will get way more addicted way faster than his dad. When a child's brain is like a sponge, they are soaking up everything. To Bethany, to your point, if they are not interacting with their dad face to face, eyeball to eyeball, working on a project or even cooking dinner together or grilling doing something together, it's like that's not happening on a video game. No matter how we try to slice it and dice it and look at it, it's just not happening.
If I happen to have time with my children, I want to do a project. We have like these little fun homeschool construction boxes. Like I want to dive in and do something hands-on with them. And I honestly could not see a video game taking place with that. And that, I mean, it's so valuable. I mean, like you said, these younger years are so valuable.
But even the teenage years are valuable too. It's like any time you have with your loved ones is valuable. And so they have different needs in these different seasons, but making sure those needs are met and not being overburdened by tech, social media, gaming.
You're letting these devices, or the people who created these gameplays and the systems, like they're being taught something by somebody else.
And we have to understand how close pornography is to video gaming, because so much of the game is sexualized in the characters. You're just a half a click, I say, not even one click. I say you're a half a click away from exposing your son to that whole world, that will be, blind to you because you're not in the game with him every second playing if you're letting him play. The other thing, again, with pornography too, I think parents don't understand the cumulative effect of pornography. It's not like, oh, my child saw something once or and then they throw the towel in because they think, oh, well, they've already seen the naked body. So, well, it doesn't matter. Well, no, it does matter. Every single image, it is cumulative. It is stored in their brain like a little memory chip. We can't forget the violent JPEGs that we see. They get stuck in our brain and it causes a lot of stress, and their adrenaline goes up. Their amygdala is stimulated. They're living in a chronic stress state. And that kind of defines what's happening to our kids today on social media, video games, pornography. Those are the things. And when they're outside, they could be trying something really hard outside, but it's not the same kind of stress. It is very healthy stress. Or maybe they're learning something on their piano and it's really hard and they get frustrated, but that's very healthy for them. That problem-solving stress is very healthy because it goes up and it comes down. But when they're on a screen, it goes up and it does not come down. And it's chemical, it's emotional, it's physical. The physical changes, emotional changes. There's so many things that happen. And so again, we're not going to scare everyone. What I'm here to tell you is that as parents, we have complete control over this. Yes, it is the world we live in, but you know what? We're adults and there's alcohol out there. There's things that we do. We drive around the highway, right? But we don't let our kids do this. Just because it's there doesn't mean that it's good for our kids. And I also will tell you with young kids, with kids the ages that y'all have right now, this is the time where you establish your values around screens in your home. And so you could argue with me and say, well, I think a little bit of Fortnite is okay. Well, actually it's not, because that's for teenagers and up, but every first grader is playing it. But you could say, well, what about a little bit of this and a little moderation here? And we don't want our kids to binge and go crazy over this stuff. Well, I'm telling you that moderation doesn't work in these areas. And the reason why is because they're too addictive.
Like you said, they're violent. So you're exposing your first, second, third, fourth grader child to things that are very violent, and that's not good for the heart, mind, or soul.
No, and then you have
to question this normalization, and plus also understanding that there is a I'm guessing $1 billion industry
Yeah.
behind these games. So of
Yeah.
course they want you in, and of
Yeah.
course they're going to normalize
Yeah.
it. And of
Yeah.
course they're going to be like, yes, this is a-okay for your children.
Mm-hmm.
Join on in and have some fun.
That's
And
right.
then the other thing I'm thinking about too is like, we have a lot of young men that are struggling to grow up, to
They're not
mature,
growing
to
up.
step into the real world, to become providers for their family, to become
Mhm.
faithful men who can
Mhm.
serve society at large in a solid and healthy way. And so that's I mean, I'm sure we could have a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation
yeah.
on
That is
that.
the side effect. You're exactly right. And my daughter now is in her late 20s, and she's really struggling with this. With dating, it's very hard.
Yeah.
And vice versa. For boys to date girls that are addicted to social media, that's a very bad thing. And then for the girls to try to date boys that are just playing video games all day. And what happens with any of these screen addictions, it pulls you out of the real world. Everything else is lame that's happening in the real world. You want to
Yeah.
escape to your video game. I mean, Adam, how can you get more dopamine than Call of Duty? I mean, it's
I
crazy
played
how
it. It's
much.
super fun. Yeah. Then it's
Yeah.
like, I know I got to stay away from that because I mean, it's been 12 years since I've played Call of Duty, but I still remember it and I still
Yeah.
know it. And I know it's like super fun.
Yeah.
But, I was thinking about when you were talking about the relation of like drugs, alcohol, and this just being right up there with it. I was like, it clicked with me, like being Christian, like, where does the Bible talk about this? And in Ephesians 5, 16, it says, and do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always for everything in God the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. So, when you related, screen addiction to there, it's like, yeah, actually the Bible does talk about this. It does talk about
Absolutely.
about being
Yeah.
sober minded and being
Mm.
together. Like when we're singing psalms and hymns together, we're together as a community. But when we separate ourselves with our games and social media, we're so isolated. And that's not, I mean, as a Christian leader in a family, like we need to take ownership of that and lead our families towards what is good and right and truthful.
Absolutely. And we can't expect our kids to do this on their own. They
Yeah.
cannot do this on their own. You have to hit that pause button. You have to be bold. You have to stand out. You have to be the parent. You'd be the coach. That's what we say. Parents, take your parent hat off and put your coach's hat on. And what would you do if your team was losing? You got to go back to the basics. It's not that hard. And to your point with that verse, it's also really important to stay away from the things that are going to cause you to stumble. There's no sense in getting right up to the edge of the cliff. It doesn't work. And many families today try to do that. They try to have one foot in and one foot out when it comes to toxic screens, and they get burned, and they get really burned. And depending on how much time their kids are actually, in the content they're getting into, they can get it can be life altering. It can be so tragic. I have talked to many families over the years that their children have committed suicide. There's this whole other dark side to it. But
Yeah.
it starts right now with the ages that you have right now.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you get this.
Yeah.
It is not worth it. For everyone listening today, I just have to explain that it is not worth it. We've done it both ways. We've done it with, oh yeah, we're going to manage it. That doesn't work. And then we did it, with Andrew and Evan and Melissa, we just said, guys, we're taking a different path and we're going to try something different. And you know what? They thrived. They have so much fun. In fact, now they're in college. They just started college, and you know what? They could go get smartphones and social media and games, and they don't care. It's not their thing because they grew up without it. And so they're using a phone now as a tool, but they don't have social media and they don't care to. You are creating this little human being, and you are structuring their life, and you are responsible to do that. If you pull back on that responsibility, something else will influence them. So it's either going to be you or it's going to be the world. It's going to be the screen world influencing them. And with Adam, my oldest, his name is Adam too. I will say that there are, we're very happy to be on the other side. He did come back from the military. He did go to college and he's doing well. But there are scars. And if he had to do it again, he wishes little things. He wishes that he never quit his piano, because his little brother has 3 albums on Spotify and he's really good at the piano. And
he should go take piano lessons. It's not too late. Just go
he's
start
so
now.
sad.
I said that.
Because I will, but you learn it so much easier when you're little, like with your kids, they're little sponges. And he said, Mom, I don't have anything. I have no memories from my childhood. And if that isn't enough to make you go rip the Xbox out of your house and to throw that smartphone away, I don't know what is. But the little boys.
It reminds me, I had a bit of a temper when I was younger. And at one point I threw my brother's Nintendo box off our porch.
Yay.
Porch window. So for some reason, my younger self just was not into this
having
scene.
it.
Like I saw right through it as like a 8-year-old.
Yeah.
I just remember.
Oh my goodness.
I was a little
good for you.
But
You knew. But see, Adam can't go back and get that.
Yeah.
We can't go back and fix that. And the younger kids, they were in art class. We have stuff all over our house that they made. They did their music. They did violin. Melissa, my daughter, was a D1 athlete in gymnastics. We did life very different. And so I'm here to be encouraging wherever you are in your journey. Like if you have a child right now who's been like playing on his video game the whole time you've been listening to the podcast, you know what? You need to start today. We have like a 7-day challenge that's free. We have a 30-day challenge that's free. And then that's in one of our Connect groups. And then the biggest request that I had about 5 years ago, Bethany, was, Melanie, can you put all this science in a way that I can explain it to my kids? Because this is what's happening in our culture. We're all realizing this now, that we got to get rid of these smartphones and we got to get rid of social media and the violent video games. But we can't just go jerk it out of their hands. We have to explain to them why. And even your kids right now, I am so excited because we have an elementary version that is almost ready, and I cannot wait, in fact, to show it to you, because it's for like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, like those young kids. But the one that's out right now is the middle school version, and it is Kids, Brains, and Screens, and it's for your homeschool class. It's for your school. It's for you as a family to sit down and go through. And this is where you're going to explain this all to kids.
Y'all, we have the Kids and Screens book that Melanie just showed, and it is so incredible. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it. We'll put the link in the show notes for y'all. So if you want to check it out. And the cool thing is it's not on the computer. So you get the book. And
it's
you
a print book.
And just read a little bit each and every day, and just start young, depending on where you're at, just start where you're at, wherever you're at. Like, it's not too late to start, but it's also maybe not too early. And so, Melanie, I'm super excited to hear you have the elementary version coming out. Because I did read the older version with my 9-year-old, because he's pretty mature. So we read a bit of that with him, and he was really interested in it. And it's cool to see, like, we are taking a low tech approach in our home. Our children are not engaged on devices ever really alone. And we're hardly on them. We're just in nature. We're doing projects. We're doing school. We're doing life. We're moving our bodies. We're reading books. Right now we're currently finishing Where the Red Fern Grows for the 3rd time. It's such a good book. And I love the element of this young boy working so hard to get his hound pups. And I'm like, this is what young men need. They need to figure out working for something that's challenging and using their body. And it's just, there's so many challenges in this world, but we're here to bring this to you, to encourage y'all to just be wise in this area. Melanie and ScreenStrong has brought amazing resources. So if you need support, check it out in the show notes. Melanie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your incredible story. And while there was a lot of hardship, I think because of what your son went through, tell him thank you, that while it's devastating, it's also you're being able to change so many people's lives through what you went through. And so
Yeah. Through
hopefully
what he
he
did.
can, go play
Yeah.
piano and enjoy
I know.
whatever it is that he wants to enjoy in life.
Yeah. Well, and I just also want to just end with the encouragement. If you're listening, I've been where you've been if you are in a struggle, and I'm not being trite about it. You really can kind of break free from it, but it might take a little work at first. And, with the video games, there are still a lot of questions that you may have. Well, can you play a little bit? Can you play Pac-Man? Some of the older games don't have the same dopamine problem that the newer violent games do. But with phones, I will tell you the answer is no on the smartphone. There's no way that you're going to be able to manage it. And so right around 9 and 10 is when kids start getting smartphones. And 48 months of high school, Bethany, is such a short period of time. When you think about it like that, 48 months of high school is such a short time. It's such a short time. And what you gain as a result of not having all that exposure. And then when your kids are a little bit older, mine didn't get a phone until they were 18. And you know what? They did just fine. They're more mature. They can handle things, and they are going to be just fine. They did not feel left out. They did not feel like, it wasn't like we got them a phone and all of a sudden they didn't know how to use it.
Didn't your children like get top of the class and class president? Like they obviously weren't oddballs. They were not
oddballs. Adam, they knew everyone in the high school. And so Andrew was the senior class president. Evan was the student body president, because they actually had relationships, and they still have very close relationships with a lot of guys. And that is so rich, and we wouldn't trade that for anything. But when you throw in that screen and it starts to get that stronghold when they're 9 and 10 years old, you will have a very different pathway. You will argue with your kids. And I always say, you should never have anything in your house that makes you argue with your kids. Like, you don't argue about Legos, right? And you don't argue about books.
I don't know. We argue a little bit about Legos in our house.
You argue a little bit
like those key pieces that the children want, and then like me tripping on the Legos.
And you tripping. Okay, well, you're not telling them they're evil.
They love Legos. The creativity levels that our children are bringing through that. It's so cool to see. And
so fill their life with all of those things, and there will not be any more room for mindless screen time. And that's what my encouragement is. Spend a little extra money on the trampoline, spend extra money on some more Legos if you need to. Do what you need to do to get that family time really prioritized in your life, and keep hitting the pause button on the screen decision. Trust me, you do not need to go there. Your kids are going to be fine. They're going to be way more than fine. They're going to have so many advantages that other kids don't have that live their life on screens. And the boys are in college now, and in their freshman year, when they would go meet people, Bethany, this is so funny. Because they would all say, people would meet them and say, oh, what's your Snap? Or, something about TikTok. And they would say, oh, we don't have social media. Every single time, 100% of the time, the other kid would say, oh my gosh, I wish I didn't have social media too.
Wow.
So they get a little bit older, and they get it. And I wonder what this generation is going to think,
it's almost
about
like the mistake generation. I feel like we're going to look back and be like, wow, a lot of mistakes were made on the
it's just like smoking.
Below. Like,
we used to let kids smoke too. And now we look back in judgment. And so we just got to be careful. We have to get educated. And that's why we're here. We're here to educate. We're not here to blame anybody. We're going to educate you guys, and you're not going to make all the same mistakes that we made. And thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to come back, and maybe you can have the boys on, and you know what? They can tell
that
you.
Would be epic. Cool. We would love that.
They would love to talk about growing up without all this stuff. So,
all right, Melanie, we'll have an amazing time. Yeah.
Thank you
so much for sharing.
Wow, that was an incredible conversation. I am fired up just to continually push this message and this awareness of what actually happens with our technology and gaming, social media, pornography. These are all really big issues in today's society. And some of the things we didn't really mention about in this episode, in this conversation with Melanie, is you have to also consider the posture your children are sitting in. They're slouching over, they're lounging around, they're not moving their bodies. And this is a major health challenge. We're going to have a lot of children with really awful posture from their devices, from gaming, and that is also really devastating on our health. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I hope that you can really take some time to think through this and be thoughtful, protect your children from where they need protection. And as a family, as someone, I grew up in Hawaii, and so I grew up playing on the rock sides of the island. We're diving, riding turtles, looking for shells. And while I know that's not like what everyone can do, I think there's a way to find your best version of nature where you live and create connection together as a family. And
go the extra mile to get that extra Lego set rather than that video game. And yeah, the posture thing is a huge one. I mean, for you, that's always been something to focus on and how it affects. I mean, there's so much science, if we're going to go in the science route, about how posture affects like your mood. As soon as you sit up, like you feel more alert and you feel more attentive.
yes.
Whereas like being the slouch like this, it affects your mood, it affects your emotions, your hormones. Yeah,
yes.
you could. Yeah, like you said,
we've
there's
actually,
a lot to unpack.
like, I mean, I'm not like I need science for all my information,
Right.
but there is a lot of science you heard Melanie mentioning it, and then even around posture and health and the blue lights and screens, there is just so much going against you in this to create good health. And so let's raise healthy, strong, resilient young children who can lead this next generation to be overcomers, lights shining bright, movers and shakers that are just epic humans, And so if you guys want to check out what Adam and I have got going on, we have our private community. It's an amazing community of like-minded people wanting to dive into faith, health, overcoming, and creating amazing connection and relationships as a family. And again, Melanie's links, we'll put all these links in the show notes. We're so grateful you are here. Hope you're encouraged. We're cheering y'all on in your journey of life.
Aloha.